going to be utilizing 3 applications in this video. The first application is Google Meet, the second is PowerPoint, and the third one is YouTube. So for today's lesson is we are going to talk about Ozymandias. So Ozymandias is a sonnet written by none other than Percy by Shelley. Percy by Shelley was born on August 4, 1792 and he died on July 8, 1822. So he was considered as one of the major English Romantic poets. So Harold Bloom calls him a superb craftsman, a lyric poet without a rival, and surely one of the most advanced skeptical intellects that ever write a poem. So, a radical in his poetry as well as in political and social views, Percy by Shelley did not achieve fame during his lifetime, but in recognition of his achievements, it grew steadily following his death, and he became an important influence on subsequent generation of poets including Browning, Swinburne, Hardy, and Yeats. So, fun fact about him is that he studied in Eton College and Oxford, but he got expelled by writing a paper that argued against the existence of God, and he was deeply political, and he was also considered as a pacifist, but he believed in protest, but not the kind of violent one. So Ozymandias was written by Shelley during the reign of King George III. So as you can see on our screen, there's a lot to say about this king who reigned longer than any other king. But the key point to remember is that King George was involved in multiple military conflicts around the world. Of course, Shelley being a pacifist, he hated that kind of oppressive monarchical government, and he felt that a revolution was needed to overthrow it. Another context of the poem can be interpreted that it is about Ramesses II. So Ramesses II was known as Ozymandias, and he was an Egyptian pharaoh in charge of Egypt during the biblical exodus of Moses. But one thing to point out is that this pharaoh was a ruler who led many battles to protect Egypt as well as to extend the borders to take new land. So notice the similarity between him and King George III. So now let's move on to Romanticism. So as you can see, Romanticism is a movement in the arts and literature that originated in the late 18th century, emphasizing inspiration, subjectivity, and the primacy of the individual. So, Shelley belonged to what is known as the second Romantic poets. So, he belonged in the second generation of Romantic poets. So, Romantic poetry was described as a dislike of urban life and embracing the natural world. It is also considered as the love of the supernatural and as well as the use of ordinary everyday language. So now we have here on the screen is Horace Smith. So Shelley was having a writing competition with his friend. So his friend was Horace B. Smith, and both of the poems that they wrote about is about Ozymandias. So both poems were published, and many people thought that the inspiration for the sonnet was the British Museum had acquired the statue of Ramesses II, but there was really a different inspiration behind that poem. So now I will be playing a YouTube video of Ozymandias. So I hope you guys enjoy this 2-minute video from YouTube.
I met a traveler from an antique land who said, "Two vast and trunkless legs of stone stand in the desert. Near them, on the sand, half sunk, a shattered visage lies, whose frown and wrinkled lip and sneer of cold command tell that its sculptor well those passions read which yet survive, stamped on these lifeless things. The hand that mocked them and the heart that fed. And on the pedestal these words appear. My name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair." Nothing beside remains. Round the decay of that colossal wreck, boundless and bare, the lone and level sands stretch far away.
So now that we're done listening or watching on our YouTube video, let's now move on to the themes that Ozymandias have. So I have prepared or I have found two themes that is very profound on our YouTube video. So the first one is power and authority. So the major theme of Ozymandias is that those with power are deluded in their belief that their power is supreme and invincible. So the power in the world that they think that are powerful and their power would never go away. So basically the might and power of leaders does not last. So as you can see here, we have here the statue of Ramesses II, and this was said to be acquired by the British Museum. So for the next theme is that we have form and structure. So why form and structure? So as we can see, Ozymandias is written in a sonnet form. So the first thing to notice about this is that a sonnet is a genre of love poetry which originated in Italy in the 13th century. So the sonnet was first used by Giacomo da Lentini, but his form was made famous by none other than Petrarch. And now we have here on the screen the Petrarchan sonnet. So Petrarch made Lentini's form famous during the 14th century. So the Petrarchan sonnet is composed of 4 specific characteristics. So we have here the first 8 lines, in which is called the octaves, pose a problem. So the first 6 lines, in which is called the sestet, solves the problem, while for the line 9 in the sonnet is called volta, and it is usually called as a sharp turn which brings about the move to the resolution. So the rhyme scheme is usually A B B A A B B A. So that's it for the Petrarchan sonnet. So next is that we have William Shakespeare. So we all know about this guy. He's a very famous poet. He has written so many plays. He has written so many poems. And now let's move on to the Shakespearean sonnet. So the Shakespearean sonnet that we have here is also composed of 14 lines, but it has 3 quatrains and a couplet. So the volta, or what we call the 9th line in the sonnet, comes in the couplet, and it is usually in a iambic pentameter. So The Shakespearean sonnet has an A-B-A-B, C-D-C-D, E-F-E-F, G-G rhyme scheme. So, why did I decide to put this here? So, as you can see, sonnet is a genre of love. But why do you think Shelley wrote it this way? So, I think it is safe to assume that since the poem is all about the powerful leaders, we can say that these people are in love with power. The poet is using form and structure to reflect the theme of the poem about the fact that power is not a term and it moves on. Alright? So, now let's move on into analyzing the poem itself. So here, let us first talk about the literal meaning of Ozymandias. So, the speaker who says, I met a traveler from an antique land who said, two vast and trunkless legs of stone. So, the speaker met someone and saw the statue. So, stand in the desert. Near them, on the sand, half sunk a shattered visage lies, whose frown and wrinkled lip and sneer of cold command tell that its sculptor well those passions read which yet survive, stamped on these lifeless things, the hand that mocked them, and the heart that fed. And on the pedestal, these words appear: My name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair. Nothing beside remains. So, the speaker who met a traveler is basically telling the story of him finding a statue in the middle of the desert and nothing beside it remains. So basically, we can say that the desert is empty. So around the decay of that colossal wreck, boundless and bare, the lone and level sands stretch far away. So now that we're done with the literal meaning, let's move on to the deeper meaning of the poem itself. So as you can see here from the title, we have here Ozymandias. So Ozy came from the Greek word ozium, meaning to breathe, while Mandias came from the Greek mandium, in which is called mandate, meaning to rule. So basically, the title Ozymandias suggests the name itself talks about power and control. I hope you understand that. So now let's start from the first line. So here we have, I met a traveler from an antique land. So here, Shelley begins Ozymandias by detaching himself from the story being told. So basically, he wants to immediately make the point that this is not an open criticism of the British monarchy. So, like what I've said earlier, he hated King George III, and he hated the oppressive monarchical government that is happening around during that time. So, this poem is clearly a thinly veiled attack. So, this is an attack against King George III. So, now let's move on to this. Half sunk, a shattered visage lies, whose frown and wrinkled lip and sneer of cold command. So let's take note of the words used here. We have here sunk, we have here shattered, we have here frown, we have here wrinkled, and we have here sneer. So these words that are usually negative is used to make it clear that the poem is an attack and not praising the powerful. So after that, it is followed by the phrase cold command. So let's note here about the adjective cold. So we can simply conclude or assume that the adjective cold in the phrase cold command could go to show that his authority is over. So whose authority? Ozymandias. So the adjective gives us a sense of depth and unfamiliarity. So showing that rather his commands are no longer enforced and are dead to the world. So we can say that the cold here is in contrast with the noun desert. Wait, where's the desert? With the noun desert, meaning that this land is no longer his and he's being foreign in this land. So only the desert remains basically, and that it simply says that he has no power to command everyone in this desert. Now let's move on to this one. We have here the King of Kings. So we have here is a title given to Jesus in many books. So as we all know, Percy by Shelley was an atheist. So I think this is a religious reference to Jesus. So we can say that Ozymandias can think of himself as almost godlike. So maybe King George III was also thinking that he himself was godlike. So let's move on to the boundless and bare. We have here an alliteration. So boundless and bare is used to emphasize the emptiness of the desert. So it is followed now by the lone and level sands stretch far away. So we can say that the desert outlives the powerful people. No? So we can say that the statue was outlived by the desert and even Ozymandias himself. You know, one thing that I found in this sonnet is that there is irony in it. So here, my name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair. So Ozymandias was expected to remain forever, but his statue is now crumbling away. Right? So it is possible to interpret that the poet's themes as a symbol of the greatness of art. So we can see here that the statue outlived the king himself. Right? I guess that's it for this lesson. I hope you guys learned about the literature that we tackled today. Bye!